心燃え立つ雨の降るとも
Hello guys, it's me Simo Orahara, and in this video I'll present to you the journey of one of the greatest characters in Bleach, Yamato Ryusai, from the start to the end, or maybe to the hell. So I consider this video my final dish about Yamato. Unless Kobo has showed us something new about him in the Hell arc. We're gonna talk about how strong Yamato is, and by diving into the manga, databooks, novels, we're gonna talk about his Ryatsu, Zanpakuto, Kido, Hakuda, and his physical strength as well as his intelligence. So guys, let's dive into the life story of this Shinigami. So the first thing we have about Yamato is found in the novel Can't Fear Your Own Word. Once upon a time, a monstrous being who was called Ikumokodomo had stormed the Soul Society. At that time, the Shinigami hadn't known yet the concept of Zanpakuto. We don't know how they fought him, but what we know is that a young man whose name Yamamoto had participated in that battle to stop him. He could have been Sasakibi's age. But the obvious thing is, that young man was known for his courage and ferocity in fighting, and he was one of those who tried to stop the attack of Ikumokodomo. It is true that the latter managed to reach the royal palace, but what is important to us is that incident is the first thing known about Yamamoto in terms of chronological events. At that time, the Shinigami didn't possess the Zanpakuto yet, so that period was mysterious from everything. I mean, were the events of that incident 6,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago? We don't know. What we know is that he was still young and in the process of learning. Also, one of the things that I find interesting about Yamamoto, he is only 168 centimeters tall. I was thinking he was taller than that. However, that fact won't erase his mighty power. And this is what leads us to talk about Ryatsu. Yamamoto has a mighty Ryatsu. Ryatsu can be manifested in many ways, such as Ichibi, Sasuke Aizen, Ichigo, Zaraki, and even Toshiro. And I always like to put Toshiro as an example of Yamamoto's strength because they both have similar Zanpakuto in many ways. One of them represents fire and the other ice. For example, in chapter 286.5, Kobo showed us Toshiro's past before he became a Shinigami, and Toshiro's Ryatsu was manifesting through cold Ryatsu. In exactly the same Hashfeld will notice how Yamamoto's Ryatsu manifested as flames that reached a temperature of 15 million degrees in the bankai stage. And I always say that Ryatsu is like the fuel of abilities. The greater the Ryatsu, the more effective the techniques becomes. Yamamoto is also one of the few characters who is able to affect others by only using his Ryatsu. And a well-known example of that is what happened to Porna now. By just concentrating a little Ryatsu on her, she has suffocated from the strength of the spiritual pressure she was subjected to. For all of these factors, Yamamoto deserves 10 out of 10 in terms of Ryatsu. And moving on to the HoHo point or Shimpo. Yamamoto is among the fastest characters, not only as a Shinigami but also within the story in general. We know that the speed of the Shimpo depends on the number of steps you take from one place to another. The fewer steps, the greater the speed is, and this is not easy at all, but requires a lot of skills and training. But when we talk about Yamamoto, we're talking about a person who had reached the highest level of this art. The most prominent example of this is what happened at the end of the Soul Society arc. Kyuraku and Okitake moved from the place of execution to this place using the Shimpo. And when they did that, Yamamoto was still in his place. We don't know the exact distance they have taken and how many steps they used, but the shock was that when they arrived at that place, they already found Yamamoto waiting for them.
Surprise!
Did Yamamoto use one step to move there? We don't know, but it is certain that the Shimpo of Yamamoto is another level. So when it comes to HoHo, Yamamoto takes 10 out of 10. When we move on to Kido. When it comes to Kido, although we don't have much scenes that show us to what extent Yamamoto is good at Kido, however, from the only scene we have of him in the manga, that scene could tell us many things about Yamamoto and Kido. First, he launched a Hado of 19's level, which is something unique. Few are the Shinigami who did a Hado above 90. And second, he did it without a full incantation. And this is also a sign of how much the Shinigami is master in this field of Kido. For this, I'll give Yamamoto 9 of 10 in Kido. And we move to the physical strength as well as the Hakuda. And here I will talk about the young Yamamoto and the current Yamamoto because there is an important matter that must be clarified. Yamamoto's age is measured in thousands of years. 2000 years ago, he was like this, and his appearance in this age looked like a man in his 50s. And at that time, he was the founder of the Ginryu school and also owned the Zanpakuto. Keep this information in your mind, guys. And after 1000 years, he fought Yamato and his shape didn't change. He was still look like a man in the 50s. However, after the first war of the Quincy, the signs of aging began to appear on Yamato and he became an old man. Kubo says in the data book that this made his physical strength diminish. So this is a fact. Yamamoto's physical strength when he became an old man has dropped to 60. And this will give you guys a terrifying and shocking perception of Yamamoto's strength when he was in the prime of his youth. Because Hakuda is a combat style that relies on physical strength combined with skill. However, with that 60%, he was able to destroy Wonder-Wise using Ikotso and Sokotso. And that's not even the full picture. Yamamoto used his own body to contain all the fire of Ryujinjaka to save the world of living from that explosion. That's why I ask this question. What if Aizen had fought Yamamoto in his youngest form? I don't think Aizen would have a chance against Yamamoto even if he used Wonder-Wise. The only solution would still for Aizen is the Hokyoku. And perhaps this is one of the main reasons why Yamamoto defeated Yamato in the past. I mean 1000 years ago. Because Yamamoto with his young body was in another dimension of strength in terms of everything. I mean, the young Yamamoto wouldn't have been cut in two as happened to him in his second fight against Yamato, which wasn't even a fight, since Yamato stole the Zankai no Tachi and Yamamoto was fighting with one arm. So based on what I have just said, I give Yamamoto 7 out of 10. And we move on to the point of Zanpakuto. What I can say first about Yamamoto, he is one of the few characters who fought several battles without possessing a Zanpakuto. And the period time of young Yamamoto didn't have yet the concept of Zanpakuto. The Shinigami of that period might have been fighting with ordinary swords that didn't carry any specific powers. But after the invention of the Sauchi by Nimaya, everything has changed. Because the idea of Zanpakuto basically would only born from something that the Shinigami used to fight with before, which is the sword. Add to which Yamamoto is one of the most masterful characters in fighting with sword. We're talking about a person who subdued the biggest criminal in the history of the Soul Society, Yachiro Unahana, who masters more than 8,000 sword styles. Moreover, he founded a school that is based on this art, the Ginryu school, and he is the one who taught Zaraki the Kendo style. Therefore, when we talk about sword skills alone, Yamamoto is one of the best swordsmen that history has ever known. And these acquired skills will be powered by the most powerful offensive Zanpakuto in history. It's Ryujinjaka, the nightmare of enemies. This Zanpakuto made everyone, whether Yamamoto's allies or his enemies, fear confronting him. But what I want you to think about regarding Yamamoto's Zanpakuto is that, as I said, Yamamoto was fighting without having a Zanpakuto, and therefore he would probably among the first to obtain a Zanpakuto besides Ichibi. Because as mentioned, the old man existed before the invention of the Zanpakuto. And one more thing, we don't have the time period between Yamamoto's having Ryujinjaka for the first time in his meeting with Sasakibe. Because if we know the exact time between these two events, this will give us a broader understanding of the strength of Ryujinjaka. For this, I believe that the period might be between 2000 years and 3000 years between the two events. And let us assume that is only 2000 years. 2000 years is the time between Yamamoto having Ryujinjaka and his first time, his meeting with Sasakibe. So think with me, guys. 2000 years before Yamamoto even met Sasakibe, he has a Zanpakuto. Just that number can give you how much time Yamamoto spent with Ryujinjaka. Add to that another 1000 years where Yamamoto will fight Yamato the first time, and another 1000 years where he will fight Yamato the second time. So do the math and you will have 4000 years. 4000 years of experience in fighting with Ryujinjaka. 4000 years of countless training, use of Shikai and release of bankai before he even met Yamato. For example, we know that the second scar was caused by Sasakibe's bankai, but we don't know the cause of the first scar. Is it Unohana or Ikimokodomoi or someone else? But this is no more than a fact that Yamamoto's life before meeting Sasakibe was full of battles. So imagine with me the degree of communication and interdependence that became between Yamamoto and Ryujinjaka. Therefore, even the release of the bankai that we have seen in the last arc cannot be considered the strongest version of Zankai no Tachi. For example, it's true that the old man used all the 4 sides of the bankai, but don't forget that he was fighting with one arm and also he is advanced in age. For this, I gave Yamamoto not only 10 of 10, but a golden 10 of 10 for his Zanpakuto. Finally, we will talk about the point of intelligence. Contrary to what my people think, the old man is not that naive person. He is just facing opponents who have used all their capabilities to remove his Zanpakuto. Yamamoto is the one who created the Ginryu school in Gotei 13. He is a man who has changed the course of the Soul Society. Would someone who came up with all of these ideas would be stupid or naive or unintelligent? No, Yamamoto's fault is that his feelings got the better of him in the last arc, which made him fall into Yhwach's trap. For this I gave Yamamoto 8 of 10. In the end guys, this was my video about Yamamoto. Tell me what do you think of this character. Maybe we'll see more about him if Kubo did the arc Hell, because Yamamoto now is found in Hell. So guys, what do you think? Tell me your opinions and see you in my next video.